A cowboy wanted a plain mail-order wife. What arrived changed his life. Forever Ethan Callahan lived on the wide, sun-scorched plains outside Amarillo, Texas, where the land seemed to stretch endlessly toward the horizon. He had grown up on this ranch, as had his father before him, and the rhythm of the land was the rhythm of his life. The mornings began with the crow of the rooster and the faint scent of fresh hay and cattle. He would saddle his horse, Rusty, and ride out to check the fences and make sure the cattle were all accounted for. By noon, the sun would beat down mercilessly, turning the dusty paths golden and bright. And by evening, the horizon would glow pink and orange as Ethan would sit on the porch of his small wooden home, sipping coffee, watching the sky darken and the stars emerge one by one. For many, this life would seem peaceful, simple, and perfect. But for Ethan, it carried a quiet weight, a loneliness that settled deep in his chest. His family had always been small, and after his parents passed away years ago, the ranch was his only companion. His neighbors were friendly enough, but the distances in Texas were great, and visits were infrequent. Most nights, Ethan would lie awake listening to the whispering wind and imagine someone sharing these moments with him. Someone to laugh with after a hard day, to cook meals together, to sit beside on the porch as the world turned quiet. Ethan had tried to meet women in town, at church gatherings or the local diner, but nothing ever worked out. Either the women were looking for a life he could not give, or they did not understand the hard, sometimes lonely work of running a ranch. He had learned to accept it, to accept that perhaps he would always be alone. Yet deep down, he still carried a hope he could not shake, a hope that one day, someone might walk into his life and feel at home on the open plains. It was on a particularly hot and dusty afternoon that Ethan found himself flipping through an old magazine he had picked up at the general store. A small ad caught his eye. It was simple, almost easy to overlook, but the words leapt out at him. Mail-order brides seeking new life in America. Simple, hardworking women wanted. At first, he laughed to himself. Could it really be possible? Could he actually find someone this way? He had always imagined meeting someone in town, someone who would come into his life naturally, but the thought of trying this new, almost old-fashioned approach made him feel a flicker of excitement. For days, he thought about it. He pictured a woman who would understand the rhythm of ranch life, someone who would rise with the sun, feed the animals, mend the fences if needed, and still have a kind heart to care for him. He wanted someone simple, not fancy, not overly ambitious, just someone who would fit into his quiet life. He worried that he might seem too old-fashioned, too stubborn, but the thought of finally having companionship gave him courage. With a steady hand and a determined heart, he filled out the forms, describing himself honestly. A hardworking rancher, tall, strong, with calloused hands and a quiet smile. He explained the ranch, the long days, the simple lifestyle, and what he hoped for in a partner. Once the forms were sent, the waiting began. Days turned into weeks. Every morning, as he fed the cattle and repaired fences, Ethan wondered if the letter would ever bring a response. He tried to keep busy, riding across the fields, checking the water troughs, and repairing the windmill that had been rattling in the wind for years. At night, he found himself staring at the horizon, thinking about who might be out there waiting to arrive, someone who could share this quiet world with him. The waiting gave him time to dream. He imagined her walking off the train, carrying a small bag, her eyes filled with curiosity and wonder at the vast Texas landscape. He imagined introducing her to Rusty, teaching her the ways of the ranch, and sharing meals by the fireplace. He pictured quiet evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing, laughter spilling into the night as fireflies danced around them. The thought made him smile in ways he had not smiled in years. Yet alongside hope, there was also fear. What if she didn't like the ranch life? What if she found it too hard or too lonely? What if he misjudged what she wanted? Ethan knew that he could offer stability and a home, but he wondered if it was enough. Despite his doubts, he told himself that life was too short to wait any longer. If there was even a small chance that someone out there might want to share his life, he had to take it. He spent evenings preparing the house, dusting the wooden floors, hanging fresh curtains, and making sure everything looked welcoming. He even cooked extra meals, imagining her reactions to simple dishes like cornbread, stewed beans, and fresh vegetables from his small garden. It was strange for him, planning for someone who did not yet exist, yet it gave him a sense of purpose he had not felt in a long time. The ranch no longer felt empty. It felt alive with possibilities. Ethan also found himself talking to the wind in ways he hadn't before, almost imagining conversations with her. "I hope you like it here," he would whisper, leaning on the fence post as Rusty grazed nearby. "It's not much, but it's home." He laughed at himself sometimes, feeling foolish for caring so much about someone he had never met, but the thought of companionship, of shared mornings and evenings, was too strong to ignore. As the weeks passed, his anticipation grew. Every letter in the mailbox made his heart jump, even when it was only bills or advertisements. He found himself waking early, checking the tracks along the dusty road leading to the ranch, hoping to see a carriage, a train, or a figure walking in the distance. The small town of Amarillo seemed quiet, but to Ethan it was full of possibilities. Every face that passed by in town made him wonder, could this be the one? One evening, as the sun dipped low over the plains, painting the sky with gold and purple streaks, Ethan sat on his porch, sipping a mug of warm coffee. He looked over the fields, the cattle grazing lazily, the wind bending the tall grass in gentle waves. "Maybe she'll come," he whispered to himself, a spark of hope lighting his eyes. "Maybe she'll be just what I've been waiting for." In that quiet moment, Ethan realized something important. Life on the ranch had taught him patience, resilience, and hard work, but it had also taught him the value of hope. He understood that love might not arrive on his schedule or in the way he expected, but he was ready to welcome it when it did. The thought filled him with a sense of calm determination. Whatever happened, he knew he had taken the step toward changing his life. He had opened the door, figuratively and literally, to someone new, someone who could turn his quiet world upside down in the best possible way. And so Ethan Callahan waited. He waited with hope, with excitement, and with a cautious curiosity about what or who might arrive at his door. The ranch was ready. His heart was ready. Even if the future was unknown, he knew that sometimes, taking a chance was the only way to find the life one truly desired. Little did he know that the day the mail would finally arrive, everything he thought he wanted would change in ways he could never have imagined. But for now, he continued his daily routine, riding across the endless plains, repairing fences, tending to his cattle, and dreaming quietly of the woman who might one day walk into his life. In those long, sunlit hours and star-filled nights, the seeds of a remarkable story were being planted, waiting to grow into something extraordinary. Weeks passed since Ethan sent his letter, and each day he checked the mailbox with a mix of hope and impatience. He had grown used to imagining who might respond, but now, as the sun climbed high and the wind swirled the dust across the plains, he felt an excitement he hadn't felt in years. He knew something was coming, though he didn't yet know what or who it would be. It was a bright morning when the postman, a cheerful man named Harold, rode up the dusty lane in his old pickup truck. The engine sputtered and coughed, but it carried him steadily across the dry ground. Harold waved as he got out, holding a small package wrapped in brown paper, tied with string. "Morning, Ethan. Got something special for you today," he said with a grin. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as he took the package. The parcel was heavier than he expected. He brought it into the house, set it carefully on the table, and inspected it. The label had a return address from overseas, and Ethan's pulse quickened. He untied the string slowly, as though doing so too quickly might shatter the anticipation he had carried for weeks. Inside there was a letter, neatly folded, and beneath it a small photograph. He unfolded the letter first, his hands trembling slightly. The handwriting was neat and precise. The words spoke of courage and hope, of a woman named Clara Nguyen who was ready to leave everything she knew behind to start a new life. Ethan read and reread the letter, each sentence making him more curious, more excited, and yes, a little nervous. Then he picked up the photograph. The woman in the picture was smiling, bright-eyed, and confident. She was nothing like the quiet, timid image he had imagined. Her smile was infectious, her posture straight, her eyes filled with energy. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. "I wasn't expecting that," he whispered to himself, his mind racing. He had imagined someone shy, someone quiet and simple, someone who would slip into the rhythm of his ranch life gently. But this woman seemed strong, independent, and full of spirit. It was a shock, but not a bad one, just unexpected. The letter mentioned that she would arrive by train in Amarillo within a few days. Ethan spent those days preparing the ranch, but this time it was different. He cleaned every corner, polished the porch, and made sure everything looked welcoming. But unlike before, his mind was filled with questions and uncertainty. How would she fit into this life? Would she like the ranch? Would they get along? He had imagined someone delicate and quiet, but Clara seemed different. The day finally arrived. Ethan hitched Rusty to the carriage and rode into town to meet her at the station. The small station was busy with travelers, the whistle of the train echoing across the platform. People carried luggage, greeted friends, and hurried to catch trains. Ethan felt a nervous excitement as he waited near the steps. He saw women getting off the train, some with families, some alone. Then, finally, she appeared. Clara Nguyen stepped down from the train, her luggage in hand, her eyes wide with curiosity and determination. She scanned the crowd until they met, and Ethan felt a jolt of recognition. This was the woman from the photograph, full of energy and life. She walked toward him with purpose, and though he had pictured someone gentle and soft-spoken, her confidence filled the space between them. She smiled warmly, but there was a fire in her eyes that made Ethan unsure of what to say first. "Are you Ethan Callahan?" she asked, her voice calm but assertive. "Yes, I am," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "You must be Clara." "That's right," she said, smiling brightly. "It's good to finally meet you." Her English was excellent, clear and precise, yet there was a gentle accent that reminded him she was far from home. Ethan noticed the way she carried herself, the way she looked around at the train station, absorbing everything with alert curiosity. She seemed strong, independent, and ready to face the challenges ahead. The ride back to the ranch was filled with quiet curiosity. Ethan drove the carriage slowly, pointing out the fields, the cattle, and Rusty grazing in the distance. Clara asked questions about everything, about the animals, the crops, the weather, and the daily life on a ranch. Her questions were thoughtful, intelligent, and showed a keen interest in the work Ethan had done all his life. He had expected her to be timid, to ask only polite questions, but she was vibrant, energetic, and full of curiosity. When they arrived at the ranch, Ethan helped her down from the carriage. The house was simple but cozy, with wooden floors, a fireplace, and windows that let in the wide-open view of the plains. Clara's eyes widened as she took it all in. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "So quiet, so open." Ethan smiled, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. "It is quiet," he said. "It can be lonely at times, but it's a good life, you'll see." Clara set down her luggage and looked around the small kitchen. "It's simple," she said, almost to herself. "I like simple." Ethan nodded, relieved that she seemed to appreciate what he had prepared. That evening, as they shared a meal of cornbread, beans, and roasted vegetables, Ethan noticed something remarkable. Clara laughed easily, told stories of her childhood, and shared her hopes for the future. She was open, honest, and unafraid to speak her mind. Ethan listened carefully, fascinated by her courage and determination. She was nothing like the woman he had pictured, yet he felt drawn to her energy. Still, the adjustment was not easy. Over the next few days, Ethan and Clara faced small challenges. Clara had never milked a cow or repaired a fence, and she struggled with the long hours under the hot sun. Ethan realized that the life he loved could be harsh and unforgiving for someone unfamiliar with it. He tried to teach her patiently, showing her how to handle the animals, how to mend the fences, and how to navigate the vast plains. Sometimes they argued over small things, where tools should be kept, how to water the animals, but each disagreement ended with laughter or understanding. Ethan learned to see the world through Clara's eyes. She noticed things he had taken for granted, the beauty of the sunrise, the patterns in the wind across the grass, the little joys of daily life that he had overlooked. She asked questions he had never considered, and her ideas often surprised him. She wanted to plant new crops, try new methods, and even suggested small changes to the ranch that made him see things differently. Clara, on the other hand, had to adjust to the vastness and isolation of the Texas plains. She missed the busy streets and crowded markets of her home, and some nights she felt the weight of being far from everything familiar. Yet, she was determined to make it work. She found small ways to make the house more comfortable, added personal touches to the rooms, and gradually began to understand the rhythm of ranch life. Despite the initial shock and adjustment, something remarkable began to happen. Ethan realized that her differences were not obstacles but gifts. Her boldness complemented his caution, Her curiosity sparked new ideas, and her laughter brought warmth to the quiet ranch. He began to see that life could be richer, more colorful, and more exciting than he had ever imagined. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Clara leaned back in her chair, her eyes following the golden light across the plains. "It's so different from what I knew," she said softly. "Yes," Ethan replied, feeling a mix of pride and wonder. "It's not an easy life, but it's honest. It has its own kind of beauty." Clara smiled, and in that moment Ethan felt a strange sense of peace. The woman he had imagined in his letters, quiet, simple, and modest, was not the woman who had arrived. But the woman who did arrive was strong, vibrant, and extraordinary, and he felt deep in his heart that this unexpected arrival might change everything. In the days that followed, they continued to adjust to each other, learning and laughing, struggling and growing together. The ranch no longer felt empty, and the house seemed warmer, fuller, and alive. Ethan realized that sometimes life did not give you what you thought you wanted. It gave you what you truly needed. Clara had arrived not to fit into his life quietly, but to make it fuller, brighter, and infinitely more interesting. By the time a few weeks had passed, Ethan found himself looking forward to every day with Clara. The mornings were no longer just about chores. They were about shared experiences, small conversations, and moments of connection. The evenings were filled with stories, laughter, and the quiet comfort of companionship. The woman who had shocked him upon arrival had become the heart of the ranch, and Ethan could not imagine life without her. Life on the ranch had changed since Clara's arrival. Every morning, Ethan rose before the sun, saddled Rusty, and headed out to check the fences and the cattle as he always had. But now he was not alone. Clara moved with him through the fields, sometimes following on foot, sometimes learning to ride alongside him. She had never been around livestock before, and the sight of large cows, their heads swinging slowly, their hooves kicking up dust, had startled her at first. She had squealed more than once when a calf ran past her feet, and Ethan had to laugh even as he corrected her. "Careful, Clara," he said one morning, pulling her back from a young bull who had wandered too close. "You have to respect the animals, not just watch them." Clara laughed nervously, brushing the dust from her pants. "I am trying, Ethan, I really am," she replied. "But these animals are huge. In my village we had chickens and goats, but never anything this big." Ethan nodded, understanding. It was a big adjustment, and he knew that ranch life was not easy. It required patience, strength, and a willingness to get your hands dirty. Clara, despite her courage, was not used to hard labor under the hot Texas sun. On some days, her hands were blistered from handling ropes, her feet sore from long walks across uneven ground. She would pause often, wiping sweat from her brow, taking a deep breath and smiling, determined to keep going. At first, these challenges led to small frustrations. Ethan was used to doing everything himself, and he expected certain rhythms and routines. He tried to teach Clara carefully, showing her how to handle the animals, mend fences, and feed the cattle. But she often asked questions that seemed obvious to him, or she did things differently than he expected. A simple task like gathering eggs from the hens could turn into a half-hour adventure with laughs, frustration, and gentle corrections. One afternoon, Ethan watched as Clara struggled to milk a cow. Her small hands were unsure, and the cow shifted nervously under her touch. Ethan stepped forward to guide her, but she insisted on trying herself first. "I can do it," she said firmly. "I want to learn, Ethan. Please let me try." He nodded, stepping back, and she continued, her hands clumsy but determined. After several minutes, she managed a small stream of milk into the pail. She looked at it triumphantly, her face glowing with pride. Ethan couldn't help but smile, impressed by her determination. "You did it," he said softly. "I'm proud of you." Clara's energy and determination soon began to influence life on the ranch in unexpected ways. She suggested small changes, better ways to organize tools, ways to plant vegetables that Ethan hadn't considered, and even new ways to care for the animals. At first, he was hesitant. He had been doing things a certain way for years, and change was uncomfortable. But he began to see the sense in her ideas. Her perspective was fresh, practical, and thoughtful, and it made the ranch run more smoothly in some ways he had never imagined. Yet it was not always easy. They often disagreed. One morning, Ethan noticed Clara rearranging the tool shed, stacking tools in a way that made sense to her but seemed chaotic to him. "Clara, I like it the way it is," he said, frowning. You'll get confused later if you keep moving things around. I understand, Ethan, but this way makes more sense for me, she replied gently. I can reach everything faster and it keeps things organized from my point of view. Ethan hesitated, then realized she was right. It was not the way he had done it, but it worked. He nodded slowly, a small smile forming on his face. All right, he said, let's try it your way. These small compromises became a pattern. Ethan learned to listen more, to value Clara's ideas, and to see things differently. Clara, in turn, learned to adapt to the routines and demands of ranch life, to respect the animals, and to understand the long, slow rhythms of this vast land. Slowly, they began to complement each other. His steadiness balanced her energy, and her curiosity and boldness brought new life to the quiet ranch. Evenings were sometimes the hardest. After long days of work, both were tired, and small disagreements could flare into larger arguments. Clara wanted to try new recipes and arrange the house her way, while Ethan preferred the old, familiar routines he had known for years. But over time, they learned to communicate better. They discovered the importance of patience, listening, and compromise. Arguments became discussions, and disagreements became opportunities to learn from each other. One evening, after a particularly long day of repairing a broken fence and moving cattle, they sat together on the porch, their hands wrapped around mugs of steaming tea. The sky was painted with the deep purples and pinks of sunset, and the wind rustled through the grass. I didn't expect it to be this hard, Clara admitted softly. I thought I could just learn quickly, but the work, the sun, it's more than I imagined. Ethan nodded, understanding. It's not easy, Clara, it's a hard life, but it's honest, and you're doing better than you think. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the distant lowing of the cattle and the soft creak of the windmill turning slowly. In that quiet, Ethan realized how much he admired her determination. She was not the timid woman he had imagined. She was brave, willing to face discomfort, to try and to grow, and he felt a deep sense of respect for her courage. Days turned into weeks, and their partnership began to solidify. They worked together seamlessly in some areas, complementing each other's strengths. Clara brought creativity to the daily routines, finding ways to make the work lighter or more efficient. Ethan provided guidance and support, teaching her the ways of the land and animals. Slowly, they built a rhythm together, a shared understanding that made the ranch feel alive in a new way. Clara also brought a sense of life and curiosity that Ethan had not realized he had been missing. She noticed the beauty in small things, the patterns in the clouds, the shape of the hills in the evening light, the sound of the wind through the trees. Her perspective reminded him to see the ranch differently, to appreciate the simple joys of life he had often taken for granted. And Ethan, in turn, became her anchor. He offered steadiness and patience, guidance and understanding, and a quiet strength that made her feel safe in this new, unfamiliar world. Over time, Clara stopped feeling like a visitor in the ranch. She became part of it, part of the land, part of the rhythm of the daily work. She found joy in small successes, the first harvest from a new vegetable patch, a calf safely born, a repaired fence standing strong after a storm. Through this shared struggle, their respect for each other grew. Ethan admired her courage and intelligence, her willingness to step into a life so different from the one she had known. Clara admired his patience, his knowledge of the land, and the quiet strength he carried with him every day. They were no longer just teacher and student, or host and guest. They were partners, discovering how two very different lives could come together and create something stronger than either had known alone. One morning after a heavy rain, they walked together across the soggy fields, checking on the animals. The air was fresh, the ground soft beneath their boots. Clara paused, looking around, and smiled. "It's beautiful here, Ethan," she said. "Even after the rain, even when it's hard, it feels alive. I'm glad I came." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "I'm glad too," he said simply, "more than I can say." In that moment, they both understood something important. Life had not been easy, but the struggle had brought them closer. The challenges, the disagreements, the sweat and effort had created a bond that was strong, unspoken, and real. They had learned to rely on each other, to trust each other, and to appreciate each other in ways they had never imagined. Over the following months, they continued to grow together. Clara became more skilled with the animals and the land, while Ethan learned to see the world with fresh eyes, appreciating creativity and boldness. They laughed together, worked together, and supported each other through the small hardships that ranch life always brought. And slowly, a deep, unshakable bond formed between them, built not on appearances or expectations, but on respect, trust, and shared experience. By the time the sun set over the plains on another quiet evening, Ethan realized something remarkable. Clara had transformed more than just the ranch. She had transformed him, too. He was no longer the lonely cowboy who had sent a letter in hope. He was a man who had discovered companionship, courage, and the unexpected joys of life shared with someone remarkable. He looked at her sitting beside him on the porch, her hair catching the last rays of the sun, and felt a quiet gratitude. She had arrived as a surprise, a challenge, and an unknown. And through struggle, patience, and growth, she had become a partner, a friend, and something more than he had ever dared to hope for. Life on the ranch was still hard, still dusty, and full of work. But now it was full of laughter, shared effort, and the quiet happiness that comes from discovering that the person you least expected might be the one who changes your world forever. The seasons on the ranch moved slowly, each one painting the land with its own colors. Spring brought fresh green grass and the scent of wildflowers drifting in the wind. Summer baked the plains under a hot sun, turning the dust golden and bright. Autumn painted the fields with shades of red and orange, and winter blanketed the ranch in a quiet, frosty calm. Through it all, Ethan and Clara worked side by side, learning, growing, and discovering the depth of their connection. Life was no longer just a series of routines and chores. It had become a shared adventure, full of small triumphs and quiet joys. Clara had grown confident with the animals. She could milk cows, feed chickens, mend fences, and even drive the tractor with ease. Ethan watched her sometimes, amazed at how quickly she had adapted to a life that had seemed so foreign to her when she first arrived. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, Ethan found Clara in the vegetable garden she had planted herself. The soil was damp with dew, and rows of leafy greens and colorful vegetables stretched in neat lines. She was kneeling, carefully inspecting each plant, her hands brushing the leaves as though greeting old friends. Ethan leaned against the fence, watching her with a soft smile. "You've done an amazing job here," he said quietly, not wanting to startle her. Clara looked up and laughed, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's nothing, really, just some careful planting and attention, but I like it. It feels like life is growing here, like we are creating something together." Ethan nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest he had not felt in years. She had brought life not only to the garden but to the ranch itself, making it feel fuller, brighter, and more alive. He realized that it was not just the land she had transformed, it was him too. Their days were still filled with hard work, but the challenges no longer felt overwhelming. Together, they had learned to face the difficulties of ranch life, to plan, to adapt, and to support each other. Clara's bold ideas and energy complemented Ethan's steady experience, and the ranch flourished as a result. The animals were healthy, the crops thrived, and the house had taken on a warmth that came from shared effort and shared care. Evenings were the highlight of their days. After long hours of work, they would sit on the porch, mugs of coffee or tea in hand, and watch the sky change from golden to pink to deep blue. Sometimes they would share stories of their past, laughing at memories and learning more about each other. Other times they would sit in comfortable silence, simply enjoying the peace of the plains and the presence of each other. One evening, as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Clara leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. "I never imagined life could be like this," she said softly. "I didn't think I would find happiness in a place so far from everything I knew." Ethan wrapped his arm around her gently. "Neither did I," he admitted. "I thought I wanted someone quiet, someone simple, but I didn't know what I really needed. You've shown me more than I could have imagined. You've made this life richer, more beautiful, more alive." Clara lifted her head and looked into his eyes. The fire of determination he had seen when she first arrived was still there, but now it was softer, warmer. "I think we needed each other," she said. "You taught me patience and care, and I taught you to see things differently. We make a good team, don't we?" Ethan smiled, feeling a deep contentment settle over him. "The best team," he said simply. As the months turned into years, their bond deepened. The small house on the plains became a home filled with warmth, laughter, and love. Friends from the nearby town began to notice the change in Ethan. He was no longer the lonely, quiet man who had sent a letter in hope. He was smiling more, talking more, and moving with a lighter step. Clara had brought a spark into his life that nothing else could have. Clara, too, had changed. She had learned the ways of the ranch, adapted to its long hours and hard work, and discovered a resilience within herself that she had never known. Yet she had also kept her own spirit alive, the bright energy, the curiosity, and the determination that had made Ethan take notice in the first place. Together, they had created a life that balanced both their strengths, a life that was richer than either could have imagined alone. One particularly memorable day, a storm swept across the plains. Thunder rolled in the distance, and lightning streaked across the sky. The wind tore through the trees, rattling the windows, and rain poured down in heavy sheets. Ethan and Clara worked together to secure the animals, move the cattle to safer grounds, and make sure the house was protected. It was exhausting, tense, and challenging, but they faced it side by side. After the storm passed, they stood together outside, looking at the soaked fields, the mud, and the slightly damaged fences. Clara laughed softly, brushing rain from her hair. "Well, that was exciting," she said, smiling despite the mess around them. Ethan shook his head, smiling too. "Exciting isn't the word I would use, but we managed, didn't we?" "Yes," Clara said, taking his hand. "Together." It was in moments like these that Ethan realized the full meaning of their relationship. Life on the ranch was unpredictable and often difficult, but facing those difficulties with Clara made everything better. Her presence brought courage, joy, and a sense of partnership he had never known. She was not the quiet, simple wife he had imagined, but she was exactly who he needed. They celebrated small victories as well. The first successful harvest from Clara's garden was a cause for celebration. They invited friends from town over, sharing fresh vegetables, roasted meat, and homemade cornbread. Clara's laughter filled the house as she taught them how to prepare new dishes she had learned from her home country. Ethan watched her, feeling a quiet pride and admiration. She had brought culture, life, and joy into the ranch in ways he could never have planned. Holidays and special occasions became opportunities for new traditions. Clara taught Ethan about her family's celebrations, while he shared his own traditions of Texas life. Together, they blended the old and the new, creating a life that was uniquely theirs. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a home, a center of warmth, love, and shared dreams. Over time, Ethan noticed a change within himself. He had always been a man of routines and solitude, but now he looked forward to surprises, to laughter, and to shared experiences. He found himself planning meals for Clara, thinking about what she would enjoy, and considering her opinions in decisions about the ranch. He realized that love was not about controlling or expecting, but about supporting, learning, and growing together. Clara, too, had grown. She no longer felt like a newcomer adjusting to a foreign life. She was part of the land, part of the rhythm, and part of Ethan's heart. She had learned to ride the horse confidently, handle the animals, and face the challenges of ranch life with determination. But more than that, she had created a life full of laughter, curiosity, and warmth. She had turned the ranch into a home, and Ethan into a man who could embrace life with joy and hope. Their love was quiet but deep, built on shared experiences, respect, and understanding. It was not sudden or dramatic, but steady and unshakable. Ethan often found himself watching Clara work in the fields, tending to the animals or arranging the house, and feeling a profound gratitude. She had arrived as a surprise, a challenge, and an unknown, but she had become the center of his life, the heart of his home, and the companion he had always longed for. On a late summer evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with shades of gold and pink, Ethan and Clara stood together on the porch. Rusty grazed nearby, the cattle moved lazily in the distance, and the plains stretched endlessly before them. Clara leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I never imagined it would be like this," she said softly. "I thought life would be hard, lonely, and strange, but with you, it's beautiful." Ethan smiled, feeling a fullness in his chest. "I never imagined I could be this happy," he replied. "You've changed my life completely. You've brought love, laughter, and life into this place. I can't imagine it without you." They watched the sun set together, the wind whispering through the grass, the stars beginning to appear one by one. In that quiet, perfect moment, they both understood that life had given them something extraordinary. It was not what Ethan had planned, not what he had imagined when he sent the letter in hope. But it was far better, because it was real, shared, and built on love, trust, and partnership. Years later, when neighbors and friends asked Ethan about the woman who had arrived unexpectedly on the ranch, he would smile and simply say, "She changed everything." And it was true. Clara had changed the ranch, their lives, and his heart. She had brought joy where there was loneliness, hope where there was uncertainty, and love where there had been longing. Ethan realized that life rarely gives exactly what we expect. Sometimes it surprises us, challenges us, and pushes us out of our comfort zones. But in those surprises, there can be the greatest gifts. Clara was that gift, unexpected, bold, and extraordinary, and together they had built a life richer and more beautiful than either had ever dreamed. On the quiet plains of Amarillo, Texas, a cowboy who had once wanted a simple, quiet mail-order wife had found something far greater. A partner, a friend, and a love that transformed his world forever.